Today, Renzo, I want to talk about utopias. Do you think every single utopia has a talón de Aquiles?
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating question. And I think you did a great job also of revealing what the phrase that we're describing or talking about today is going to be. Talón de Aquiles, is that right?
Talón de Aquiles. This is right, because this is just a Spanish phrase.
A companion podcast to News in Slow Spanish. But whereas in News in Slow Spanish, we learn Spanish through current events, in just the Spanish phrase, we do something else. What do we do, Maria?
We grab one of the many Spanish expressions that are featured in our News in Slow Spanish catalog. We bring it here and we discuss its origins and its uses, but in English.
Yes.
So, yes, I was, remember recently I told you after the earthquake in Venezuela, I started reading books about disasters and how communities recover from disasters.
Yes.
So I read this fascinating book called A Paradise Built in Hell, The Extraordinary Communities That Arise from Disasters by Rebecca Solnit. And she talks about the concept of, there's utopias born from philosophers, from economic systems, from political systems, but she talks about utopias born from disasters and how certain societies reorganize themselves. They evaluate, okay, how are we dealing with these? How are we in an individual level, as an individual, but also as a community? So that brought me to the rabbit hole of utopias. And I watched this fascinating documentary made by BBC called Utopia in Search of the Dream. So in this documentary, a professor talks about the history of the term utopia, and like Thomas More in the book, etc. But then he gives examples of different utopias that have been born throughout history. And they all have a talón de Aquiles. They all seem to have, to give you a specific example, have you heard about the Shakers?
Yes.
The Shakers in New Hampshire, they seem to be a very interesting community. For example, they had equality of rights between men and women. Yep. They were like a utopian society. But the talón de Aquiles, the
Achilles heel.
Yes, was that the founder, she vouched for celibacy. And that's what pretty much brought that entire society down. And it's very common that utopias end up turning into cults or into dystopias.
Yes. I think going back to your question, is every utopia kind of destined or cursed with an Achilles heel? It's fascinating because I think they have to be. Because in the classic sense, we're talking about these examples of utopias throughout history. We're mostly talking about utopias that are there by design. Someone or a group of people try to generate a utopia. And so the fact that they are planned and designed and they have a vision behind them, that's why they have the Achilles heel, because we as individuals, humans, are flawed by nature. And so those flaws are going to translate into the systems that we design.
Or if you want to have a large group of people follow a very strict set of rules to have that community work, you need to enforce them. And that is like ground for authoritarianism,
exactly. And you know what? In literature, in examples of fictional utopias, that's one of the most common tropes, the idea that sameness, enforcing a uniform, religion or mentality or set of ideals, that becomes the Achilles heel of the society.
It's always a struggle between the individual freedom and the welfare of the community.
And there's so many examples of that.
However, in this documentary, they also talk about this community, rural community in Virginia, which has like 100 members, and they have been living their utopia for more than 50 years. It's very interesting.
That's really cool.
They share property because they say like property is definitely one of the problems
Yes.
of capitalism, because that brings, this is mine, this is not yours, that brings comparison, that brings theft, that brings violence, etc. When you have shared property, you don't have violence. So they have like communal, they have a library of clothes. They all share
wow.
clothes, they
Yeah.
share bikes, etc.
So kind of like a commune living with some socialist ideals?
Yes, this community is called Twin Oaks.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
They actually, I haven't heard until I watched that documentary from the BBC, and I went online and I looked them up. And
That's probably part of their secret to success is staying under
their
the radar.
secrecy, yes.
and also not, so many of these examples, they have a cult figure in the middle. You said they become cults or they become dystopias, and that's part of the
Well, in this
the
case,
Achilles heel, el talón de Aquiles.
El Talón de Aquiles. I was pleased to see it was not under a single leader. It was like a group of people who makes the decisions. So it's very democratic, it seems. But on the other hand, I think, I don't know, they must have a Talón de Aquiles. But for example, they say they share everything, including partners. Sometimes that already in itself is a recipe for disaster.
I think that's el talón de Aquiles is revealing itself there.
I think
There's
so.
a recipe for disaster. Okay, I have to mention some of my favorite examples from fiction.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to love this. From film, the movie WALL-E. You love WALL-E.
I love
I know
WALL-E.
you do because
It's
you've mentioned it
one of my
before.
favorite movies, but I don't see any utopia there. Those cruise ships are horrible.
Well, but they're sold as a utopian existence for the passengers. They have no need. There's a utopia where scarcity has been eliminated. Everybody has what they need at all times. But what's the result? That's el talón de Aquiles of that system, is that all these passengers, they lose their bone density traveling in a cruise ship in outer space, and they all become obese, and they're all ultimately helpless. So when there's a emergency on the ship, none of them can practically do anything to help themselves.
It reminds me of the movie Triangle of Sadness, where you have a luxury cruise ship that suddenly, breaks.
Capsizes or
Yes.
sinks.
And of
Yeah.
course, the ultra rich have no idea how to survive in the wild. And it's I think she's a Filipino cook who ends up being like the leader of the tribe because she knows how to fish, she knows how to survive in the wild. And so
Yeah.
she becomes the ruling class, and all these ultra rich become the oppressed.
Yeah. Oh, I love that reversal. Okay, real life example. Have you heard of Fordlandia?
No.
Henry Ford.
Yes, of course.
In 1928, they attempted an experiment in the Amazon rainforest to create a utopian town, a city, that was going to be, like I said with the WALL-E example, no scarcity, food, jobs for everybody, food for everybody, education for everybody. And they were going to be run very efficiently, like Henry Ford was known, like his car company.
Certain companies are doing that nowadays.
Yes. But the fatal flaw, el talón de Aquiles of Fordlandia, this experiment in 1928, is that Henry Ford believed that the secret to, or the recipe for success would include very, very strict moral rules, including banning alcohol.
Oh.
And selecting what kinds of music were allowed.
Oh, that's it. I'm out of that community.
You can see why it failed. Exactly.
That's very interesting. So what is the origin? We're running out of time, unfortunately. What is the origin of Talón de Aquiles?
Our listeners by now, they know.
They know. We know. We all know.
Achilles heel. We chose this one even though the English equivalent is the same. It's an ancient, of course, expression. It comes from the Greek myth of Achilles, the warrior. He was half divine. His father was Peleus, king of the Myrmidons, and his mother was a sea nymph. So not quite a goddess, but definitely a divine creature called Thetis or Thetis.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she, according to legend, dips the baby Achilles in the river Styx in the hopes of eliminating all the mortality and vulnerability that he had inherited from his human half, his father. But She grabbed him by the heel
By the heel, exactly.
to dip him in the water of the river Styx. And of course, that one part of his body where her hand was wrapped around the baby's heel was not cured of invulnerability.
And it became his flaw.
His fatal flaw. And of course, we all know the rest of the legend and how Achilles was finally slain, all because of his heel. But it's become this universal concept of having that weakness, that human, very human weakness, that even in these perfect, I think that's why your example of utopias is so good. We imagine perfection, but we try to separate that from humanity, and that is the problem.
That is a problem because we are imperfect by nature.
Even though that timing was perfect just now between you and me.
Yes. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in just one more week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.